Hi, Misha here, and Happy New Year! The last video we did for 2023 was on the Black Series, the 1 in 12 scale figures, talking about the Rebel Strike team on Indoor. And to kind of balance that out, we looked at, of course, that would be from Return of the Jedi. Let's go back to the original Star Wars, retroactively named A New Hope, because retconning has been part of Star Wars literally since the beginning. We're going to talk about these and the Battle of Yavin a little bit. But this is mostly going to be a story time, and I explain how I was doing really good avoiding getting into the Micro Galaxy Squadron, the MGS from Jazzwares, even though I was aware of these from the very beginning, and even though I was a big Micromachines action fleet fan in the 90s. I was doing a really good job until my mother got me this for Christmas, and now I've kind of fallen down the rabbit hole thanks to Amazon reward points and post-holiday discounts. And honestly, the prices on these are quite good. I want to explain why I was a little reluctant to get into this line, pros, cons, and after having this set and a few others, kind of give my review what is maybe not as good as I thought and maybe better than I expected. And also I wanted to mention this pack because no one else has done it that I can find. This is the Battle of Yavin set, the Trench Run. And it comes with all 4 vehicles here. We have Red 5, Darth, which is of course a T-65B X-Wing. Like I said, this is an impromptu video. And we have Darth Vader's TIE Advance, the X1. And then we have his 2-ring wingman, both who are actually named characters. And both are standard TIE fighters or TIE LNs. And at first I thought that was kind of odd that they did duplicates, but again, they're doing a set here. And in addition to the 4 ships, we have a total of 5 personnel, 5 crew, 5 action figures. Well, slightly action figures. To be fair, they're almost as articulated as the original Kenner 5 POA. So, there's that. So, a little bit of this and that. Telling stories, whatnot, talking about the battle. But let's talk about the battle towards the end. Let me kind of tell you, my thoughts going in. Not only is my mother responsible for me getting into this line, she actually was the one who got me into the Action Fleet line by accident. Back then, 1995, internet, well, we did have internet. In fact, I had America Online, but you didn't get on there and order things. And we were in a small town. I was still in high school, or maybe even junior high. And, the nearest Toys R Us or KB Toys, we had both, were about 45 minutes away by the new fancy interstate, which, wasn't all that old at that time, believe it or not, or about an hour away by the older highway. She went, and I asked her to look for this, well, sort of, the Darth Vader's TIE Advanced. This was right when they were starting to reintroduce the Kenner molds, updated slightly for the Power of the Force 2. And I wanted to get a few just for fun. I was really kind of aging out, but still I like Star Wars, and a friend did too. And so I wanted to get a few that I missed in the 80s. I didn't get a lot of the 77, 78 vessels because I was not alive when the original one came out. So I didn't get the TIE Advanced. And I said, hey, if they have it, pick it up. If you see it, let me know. And she brought the TIE Advanced, but it was the Action Fleet, which I had never heard of. Now, I did have the small, the couple of inches Micromachines, the little 3-packs. And I didn't know, and at first, I can't say I was, well, maybe I was slightly disappointed. But this quickly went away. The original action fleet, a little larger than this. They all came with 2 characters. The TIE Advance came with Darth Vader himself and a standard TIE pilot. And I quickly unboxed it and realized I really liked it. I like the Micromachines, the standard ones, but I'm going to be honest, they had quite a few factory errors. Like, you get some and the rubbery plastic would be warped. There'd be little like bubbles that would pop. The action fleet was considerably just nicer made. And for the time, pretty articulated. The little figures could move their arms up and down and could move their legs, but they're one piece together. So essentially they were 3 pieces and had basic painting, but little mini figures, and they're about 1.25 inches tall. And I started buying them. And to my mind at the time, they weren't exactly expensive, but they were not cheap either. I'm trying to think what we paid for it. I think when they were full price, they were either $10 or $12. And keep in mind, a regular 3-pack of Micromachines was like $4. But it was worth it. And they were all kind of sized to the box, kind of like Eagle Moss did with their Star Trek series. They weren't scaled to each other. So they were all roughly, 5-6 inches long. And they all tried to have some kind of action feature. In the 90s, shooting, firing missiles were a thing. Darth Vader's actually had an opening canopy, which this does too. Of course, I just trimmed my fingernails and realized that. Yeah, you'll believe me. I usually have a little pick. I used to get these. Yeah, well. I can open it when my fingernails were longer, but I just trimmed them. Anyway, it opens the same. It is clear on top, clear in the front, and Vader sits in there. Now this Vader, to make him sit, you take his cape off. The original one, he had a small skinny cape, like skinny jeans. Oh, and I'll just press him up. Because you can press the bottom to kind of get him out of the seat. That's something that the old one didn't have. And I've heard some people say they have a hard time getting him seated, but I'm fine. You just, press him in there, kind of center him up. I use the hinge as a good center for his head. And then that locks pretty good. There you go. Anyway, they had a little cutout in the base of his chair. Kind of looked like a toilet. But that's where his skinny cape went. I like this a lot better because the other one looked a little funny when you took him out of his seat. And the original one had an opening engine compartment. And this one does too, but again, just trim my nails. And when these are new out of the package, they're kind of stiff. They get better with time. You can also pull off the wings for battle damage. Some have wobbly wings. This one seems pretty tight, but I haven't really tried pulling them on and off. But yeah, this is Darth Vader's. It's a little smaller in the MGS, which was one of my reservations about maybe getting into these. Keep in mind, I am blind, so I can listen to reviews on YouTube, but I can't see them. So hearing, they're like Action Fleet, but smaller. Also, some people said they're lightweight, and the plastic feels thinner compared with Action Fleet. And that kind of turned me off. I was like, well, why would I want to get something smaller and seemingly of cheaper plastic? So that's one reason I hailed. And here's one of the 2 ties, one of Vader's wingmen. The canopy opens the same. This too has an exposed engine hatch thing in the back. Not much to it, but it gives you some feature. And much like the original Action Fleet, you can pop the wings off for battle damage to have it going, which is actually very appropriate for Vader's 2 wingmen in the Battle of Yavin. And I do see what they mean about it is thinner and it is smaller. But there are good reasons for both. For one, thinner isn't always worse. For one, with modern plastic, modern injection molding, and newer tooling, they can get a lot more detail. There's a lot more texture. And from what I've been told, the paint is considerably better as a general rule. I remember the old action fleets and even the old Micromachines themselves had plenty of factory errors. They were essentially hand painted at the factory. These are painted, of course, but they're painted by a machine, which, while there will be errors, of course, and misalignments, the chances of it seem down. And another reason these are smaller, unlike the action fleet, there's at least an idea to have these in scale. Nominally, our little figures, which we will look at, are 1 inch, so a little bit smaller than the action fleet. But 1 inch is actually great for me because that's the primary scale I collect for Hobby Master Corgi. Here's one of their pilots, and we'll do some more comparisons later. So I'm already collecting that scale. Now that's not to say each of these is going to be exact 1/72 scale vehicle. But what is nice, when you compare the ships, when a ship is supposed to be bigger or smaller than other ships, generally speaking it is. Looking at our two ties so far, Vader's is shorter but longer than the tie LN, as it should be. Whereas with the action fleet, that was often not the case. And I really, really like scale. It doesn't have to be perfect. There are plenty of things that aren't perfectly to scale. The Black Series, even high quality brands like Hobby Master aren't always completely right. But at least if you have the general essence, this is bigger, this is smaller, this is roughly the size. In fact, I've tried putting Hobby Master pilots in here, and they fit even a little loose, because while Hobby Master keeps the head and the torso 1/72 scale, to fit them in different cockpits, they usually scale back the little legs. In fact, some that come with, like the French Rafale, don't even have legs, because there's just no way to get them in. And the figures that come with these have rather long legs, but then again they move, whereas a lot of model figures are just pieces of soft plastic or hard rubber. So yeah, figuring out that these not only scaled to each other, but were, generally speaking, in my preferred scale, that was pretty attractive. But I was kind of concerned about these being that light plastic. And with that, enough looking at the baddies, let's pull out Red 5, Luke Skywalker's T-65B X-Wing from Incom. Really, not just the Rebellion's cutting-edge starfighter, but one of the most cutting-edge starfighters. It really just introduced into Rebel service just a year or two before Yavin itself. So, holding these in hand, and again, I really considered picking these up ever since they were announced in mid-2022. But I was pretty well content to just watch reviews, and I was like, they'll be plastic, they'll be more toy than I'm used to. I typically collect die-cast. I do have some plastic models, but it's like, they'll be too toy-like, and a lot of people were saying in the beginning they're not quite as nice as the action fleet, so I thought I've already got my action fleet. And actually, yes, I still have my childhood action fleet ships, although they've been up in the attic for quite a long time. But I can get them down, though. But since I got this for Christmas, hey, that's a perfect gift. Something you've kind of always wanted, but never bought for yourself. And the packaging was impressive. These all came together in a long, skinny box, individually packaged, and many reviews have already talked about how the figures are. We can look at Luke here. This has got a little lip that's easier to grab than on Vader's tie. It opens up pretty far, and Luke's in there, and it kind of impresses me. The cockpits, the controls, are pretty well defined for a toy. And if you want to have his cockpit more at a realistic level, there's a couple of notches about there, but you want it all the way open if you're going to put him in. Trust me, it's a lot easier. All right, go ahead and get him out. He's a lot easier to get in and out than the ties. Here, little Luke is. Now, I will say these original Series 1s aren't quite as well painted, again, or so I'm told, compared with later ones. And notice how long his legs are. That's kind of why, but otherwise, not bad. They move, they're quite stiff. His arms move together. His feet can separate. They actually are that way so they can straddle things. So he's an inch. And here he is next to the little Hobby Master guy I grabbed. So the Hobby Master guy has undersized legs. And his are maybe a little long. But part of that is the reason they do it. So they can straddle speeders and just fit in cockpits. But when you bend him and literally compare them back to back, their torso and even head are pretty much the same. Close enough anyway. Close enough. And those moving arms and legs actually are great for getting them in the cockpit. And you can kind of position them, angle them to hold them in best. And the reason they do that, the idea, unlike a lot of model planes where the pilot's kind of tailored to that style of cockpit, MGS was trying to make these totally interchangeable. In fact, the hope is that all their little mini figures will fit in really all their ships. I'm sure there's a few that can't for bizarre reasons. For like example, the Obi-Wan and Princess Leia have robes on, so that limits them from going on speeders. But yeah, so that's one neat thing. We also have our R2, who's totally removable. There's a button you push, much like on the TIE Fighters, to get him out. I'm not going to punch him out because you've seen it before, I'm sure. And this one fits nice and tight, but they thought about that. You don't have to pry him out. We also have landing gear. I was kind of a little bit worried about these two, based on what some people were saying. It sounded like they might be really clunky and ugly. And they're not model perfect, but they're not bad. They're better than the old Titanium series, and I like those, and they actually hold very well. They have detents. In fact, most things. See how, and it's secure. Even if you have one that's a little floppy, a little bit of blue tack up in the mag well will fix it, no problem. And then, of course, we have what all X-Wings have to have, opening wings. And there's at least two standard positions they go to, and some people reported floppiness. And I believe that, and I'm sure some are, because the early Titanium series, even the later ones, heck, even the newer Black Series Titaniums, are really floppy, either when they're open or closed. It's hard to find one that's perfect each way. This one's not. Maybe it'll wear in with time, I don't know. But I like how secure it is, and I like that it has detents. And it's a little bit of an uneven edge there, but not bad. And the blaster cannons are reasonably straight. Almost every X-Wing, one of the cannons is a little caca. That's just kind of how it is. One negative I'll give against this particular mold, the engines. I don't know why this got started years ago, but a lot of X-Wings have it where the top engines stick out further than the bottom. It's a very common thing. You see it a lot. That's not true. The only good thing is this isn't near as exaggerated as some. So it could be a lot worse, but I wish they were more even up. Oh well. And you could always say it's a different variation, what have you. And those are the features of this. And it does feel more durable. And the plastic, once I have it in my hands, doesn't bug me. It is light, but it's almost so light that it's kind of a novelty. And the kind of plastic doesn't feel like cheap Fisher Price plastic. It actually feels like model plastic, like you might find on an easy model or one of the, less expensive models, but still a plastic model. Now, this is not a model, but it is amazing how much like surface detail and stuff they get into these now compared to what we had when I was a kid. I mean, a lot of our toys were basically pretty simplistic die-cast or kind of hunks of rubber when it came to ships. And while I like action figures just fine, I've always been a ship person. In fact, the very first Star Trek toy I ever bought was a die-cast Enterprise D that could saucer separate. Yeah, and speaking of die-cast, that brings me to another thing. I have plenty of X-Wings. I've got the Titaniums, I've got the old Action Fleet, and there were a couple other lines that I picked up, and that's something else. I didn't want this to just be a flash-in-the-pan line, because whenever a Star Wars line starts off, just like a Star Trek line, there's like 6 ships they have to do. For Star Trek, it's like the Enterprise, both ones, Klingon Bird of Prey, the Romulan Warbird, etc. You get the idea, kind of the space ones that everyone does. And that's fine if you have a huge line like Eagle Moss. But what if the line gets canceled prematurely and they only do like those? Then it's kind of boring. For Star Wars, of course, the X-Wing, the TIE Fighter, Vader's TIE Advanced, the Millennium Falcon, those always get done. And my fear was, especially being in 2022, immediately post-bug, what if they just do the initial wave? There were a couple of neat things in it, like the Razor Crest, but for the most part, it was ships we had before, and I didn't need more of them. So I'd hate to get into it and then get disappointed again. And why am I afraid of that? Well, because I done got burned before with this. This is the Disney line. I forget what the exact name was, but these are really nice. At least they had the potential to be. These are die-cast, and it does have an opening canopy. I'm going to set you down for a second. These are very stiff. Even has an R2 that moves back here, but the R2 and the Luke inside are not removable. Luke's a little bit smaller, and that's why, because if you're going to have a removable pilot, you've got to have a canopy and a figure big enough for your little hands to get a hold of. Oops. Yeah, this one's kind of weird too, because you have to like push it down exactly right, and then it goes down really easy, but it's meant to hold open. This too has the opening wings, but it doesn't have detents. It has kind of a magnetic, it sticks closed really well, but notice, even with this model, and this is truly a model more than a toy, it's got some wiggle, and when you open it up, it's tighter, but it doesn't take much to close this. And the guns are plastic, the wings are metal. So in a lot of ways, I actually found I like the new Micro Galaxies wing system better, because this one, especially because it's got a magnet, collapses. Now this has gear too, but it actually uses magnets again, and you have interchangeable gears up and down like on a Hobby Master or a Corgi. Aesthetically, that's a lot more appealing, but then you do have to keep the gears in a bag, and it's more of a model thing. That's not a bad thing, but just saying. Whereas something like this, having liftable gear, is more convenient, and it's definitely more toy-like. And it doesn't bug me. It really doesn't. Now this one does have a stand, which is one of the complaints people have, rightly so, about the Micro Galaxies. But I'm not super crazy about the way they did the stand on these. it plugs in on the bottom, and you actually have two pieces, either a flat one or one with the hole for this. I kind of like stands that cradle, more like what Eagle Moss uses more. I think they did this so it's positionable. I could give two shits about it being positionable. And this is probably true 1/72 scale, although the Pilot seems a little undersized to me. In fact, let's talk about scaling. How long is an X-Wing? This is not a real world craft, so we really don't know. And even Wikipedia and a few online sources slightly disagree. I've seen some numbers as low as 11 meters long, but those are pretty rare. But 12.5 to 13.5 meters seem to be the common state. So let's go on the lower end, because that actually gets repeated more these days than the 13.5. This is about 6 inches long, meaning in 1/72 scale, it's a little short. Not egregiously so, but a little bit. This one is about 7 inches, which is true 1/72 scale, at least close enough for government work. And yeah, it would be nice if this were true 7 inches. But remember, like I said, they wanted to keep these in scale to each other. And when you go to larger vessels like the Millennium Falcon, even though there's no prayer of actually getting it to 1/72 scale for any kind of reasonable price point, I did a real quick head calculation. To do a Millennium Falcon in 1/72 scale, you're looking at 20 inches long and nearly that wide. It would be massive. But they did one in this series, and we'll eventually look at it, I'm sure. It's about 10 inches, maybe 11 inches long. So still only about half the size of what it should be, but clearly larger than this here X-Wing at about 6 inches. So when you park them together, it's clear what's the bigger ship, just as when you compare this to a TIE fighter. Oh, and speaking of how long is something, at least the X-Wing, we're pretty well within a meter or two. The Vader TIE fighter, oh my god. Some sources say 5.8 meters, some say 7.8, some say 11, some say 11.5. I don't know. I will say it seems to be close to 8 meters, just based on the TIE bomber, because these solar panels seem to be the same. But yeah, the idea of it being under 6 meters is ridiculous, because the TIE fighter is supposed to be over 6 meters. Whatever. Either way, putting it next to the X-Wing, they scale very well. So back to my original point about these. Why didn't I keep collecting them? The line started off good. They came in neat boxes. They did a TIE fighter. They did a Millennium Falcon, although it's in about 1/144 scale. Again, it's just too big to do in 1/72, even at a price point. And that's one thing about these. These were not cheap. They were 40, 50 bucks, even some places 70 at full price. So they were priced more like a Corgi or a Hobby Master. The Micro Galaxies started off around 12 bucks. Sometimes you can get them on clearance for 10. And even today you can get them for about 16, 17, or in a pack in a bundle for about 20. And that's today's money versus money about 5 years ago pre-bug for these. They were pretty spendy. But I only picked up this and the TIE because that's all they really did. This, the TIE, the Millennium Falcon. Remember, like I said, about getting invested in a line and them canceling it. These died a quiet death. They did do a T-70, the later X-Wing, the sequel one, and they did do a First Order TIE fighter. But I wasn't that interested. Not for 40, 50 bucks. For 15 or 20, yeah, probably would be. So this is just, I like that it's metal. It's very heavy. But I'm discovering that this being plastic isn't a deal breaker for me, at least not at this price point. But there's another series that's come out in the last couple of years, and that would be from Hot Wheels. This is from Disney themselves. This is from Jazzware, and then Hot Wheels. Now, the original Hot Wheels diecast were Micromachine sized, or a little bit bigger. But then they started doing, I think it was in 2020, this Select series. And they do it for other brands too, which are a larger size, but still diecast. And of course, they started with the X-Wing. Remember what I said about higgledy-piggledy guns. And at first, I like these. Now, the X-Wing's not their best example. Their TIE Fighter's pretty cool. But I don't know. I find that even before the Micro Galaxies came out, I was cooling towards these. I will say I do like the Hot Wheels stand. I know some people had trouble with these getting overly loose, but I never have, and I've had this for a couple of years now. And the wings, of course, go into attack position here too, same as always. And they do have more of a detent than the Disney version, but see, they're not as locked as the Micro, and there's no magnet. Now these are metal, but your guns are rubber, and I think everyone has warped guns. I think the reason they did this was kids. You know, you can't poke your eye out with them, but good God, these are rubbery. And the nose is rubber too. Mine was always loose. Hasn't been dropped or anything. The nose really just does me in. It's like, I get what they're doing, but I don't know. And you just have a painted canopy. I would have been fine with frosted glass, but this is just painted metal. And that's a shame too, because the old titanium usually had frosted glass, sometimes even had opening canopy. In fact, the old titaniums usually had landing gear that would go up or down. Sometimes they were kind of clunky and pretty basic plastic, but they were there. These don't. And I think that's part of the reason I've kind of gotten on these. They don't have articulation except where they absolutely have to. For example, here with these wings on the Jedi Interceptor with its wings. But if they can get away without moving anything, for example, I was really looking forward to the Lot gunship. And then when I got it, it was sturdy, good heavy metal piece, but it had these rubbery guns and just no movement to it. And it didn't have the side turrets. It's like they only do articulation in the Hot Wheels Select when they absolutely have to. Absolutely. And I think that kind of wore on me a little bit. And sometimes the detailing is a little too bold, like the panel lines and stuff. And these are the smallest. See? It's actually considerably smaller than even the Micro Galaxy, and definitely compared to the Disney one here. It's heavy, I'll give it that. It is heavy. When these Hot Wheels came out, you could pick them up for about $15. But post-bug, it's hard to find them for under $25, and a lot of places are asking $30, even $35. As much as I love diecast, and as honestly solid as they are, that's too much. These are coming up nearly half the price. And if I'm going to spend $35 or more, I'd almost rather have something with features that can be displayed in different ways, like this. You know, if I'm going to pay $35, at that point I'd rather just pay $40 or $50, you know what I mean? These were okay when they were not a whole lot more than a standard Hot Wheels. And while this line was canceled early, this has continued. But I'm going to be honest, I haven't been super bowled over with their vehicle choices. They played it very, very safe. TIE Fighter, TIE Interceptor, which is a newer one, Darth Vader's, First Order TIE Fighter, this X-Wing, the T-70, the Millennium Falcon, of course, They did an AT-AT. They did a snow speeder. Normally I love snow speeders, but it's just kind of a trapezoidal chunk of metal. It's got no articulation, no canopy, no visible figures. It just kind of was boring. I hate saying that. And they just didn't do any Clone Wars stuff. I really like the Clone Wars vehicles. They did the Jedi Interceptor. They did the Lot gunship. Both of those are safe bets. But at least as of now, they haven't done the Jedi Starfighter. And again, it's been 3 years. They haven't done the V-Wing, the ARC-170, and those are among my favorite ships. Not to mention any of the Separatist ships. Vulture. Or Grievous's fighter. Or a P-38. Again, their choices are just bland. And they're usually ships that I already have multiples of. So that, combined with lack of features and the rising cost, even though these are really solid and they come with a good stand, at least reasonably good, I found myself losing interest. They did one capital ship, a Star Destroyer, and I really liked it. And I thought, okay, cool, now they're going to do like a Mon Cal cruiser, maybe a Corellian Corvette, or a Venator. I think that was my biggest hope. Nope, at least not yet. They did Boba Fett / Jango Fett ship, but somehow they managed to make Slave One boring too, especially with the big canopy. That ship, and I'm fucking blind, and even to me it needs frosted glass or something. And it doesn't, it's just a big black glob of paint. I don't think even the wings articulate. Yeah, a Slave One that can't change positions. Yes, I know they want to call it a Fire Spray or Boba Fett ship now. Screw that, it's always going to be Slave One. Always going to be Slave Leia, although I have to admit Hutt Slayer Leia is also a pretty badass name. How about Slave Slayer Leia? Wait. Either way, with Series 1 of the Micros, they played it pretty safe, but they did do some neat things. Like I said, the Razor Crest. But Series 2, Series 3, they started doing some cool ships. For example, they did Yoda's Starfighter. They did the Delta 7 with Hyperspace Ring, which I love. But then they did more Clone Wars ships. They did a V-Wing, one of my favorites of all time. They did a Vulture droid. Okay, it took them a little time to get it out. And they did a Y-Wing. Something that, strangely, Hot Wheels hasn't done yet. And here it is. Yeah, I already bought this and it just came in. In fact, this just came out. And I really like the Y-Wing. It's from the original film. It's got that, like, clunky strip down. It was their bomber. We'll get into full reviews and whatnot, but I just kind of want to get my feelings here. But no, I really like this. Landing gear. Got your droid. Opening canopy. I like how it doesn't just generically hinge open. Some have pointed out they thought that this was a two-seater. Ironically, some of the Clone Wars versions did have a back seat, but the Rebels stripped these down, including taking out support for the second person. Typically that was reserved for cargo and what have yous. Still have our droid though, still have a rotating turret, which I'm sure if Hot Wheels did, it wouldn't rotate. Heck, this even has removable proton torpedoes here. And I love how they skeletonized the engines. That's something even the old Action Fleet didn't do. Nah, this is cool. They also just released an A-Wing, which I don't have yet, but I'm sure I'll pick it up. In fact, I picked it up on Amazon, at least I ordered it, $18 delivered with the bundle, so you get the little kind of minifigure. We'll talk about those later on too. Not bad though, basically $12 for the fighter and $5 for the little minifigure. But yeah, I'm really liking what they're doing, and best of all, they're doing a B-Wing next year. Well, this year now. And they just released a TIE Bomber, but I haven't found it in stock yet. Now that's something I really like too. Again, they're doing neat ships. Clone Wars, a little bit of sequel trilogy, but only a couple so far. And that's fine by me. Now, I hope they just stick to the fighters, since that's the scale they're in. One of the downfalls in my own personal head, something I didn't like even when I was young, you do a ship like a Star Destroyer, or even something smaller like a Corellian Corvette, and you'd have like the middle open up, and you'd have like a room in there and you'd stick your fingers in. I don't have to have something totally to scale, but that's just too much. I never was much into like those little pocket things you could, put in your pocket. I want things at least reasonably to scale. So they're stuck here in fighters. Now, if they want to do a large scale, let's say 1/700 or 1/1000 for Star Destroyers, then you could have like mini accessories, not figures, but fighters or transports. That'd be cool, but hope they, generally speaking, stick to the scale. Speaking of, let's compare it to something more real world. I thought about which plane to grab off the shelf, but since George Lucas was inspired by, even ripped off, World War II fighter planes like the Dam Busters, I was going to grab a World War II propeller. I was going to get a P-51, but this Hellcat was closer, so I grabbed it. And these World War II planes were all around 10, 11 meters long, and this is a true 1/72 scale diecast. And you can see that if we say this is 12 and a half meters, it scales pretty well. In fact, I took the pilot out of this and put it in here, and he fit fine. And I would have been able to fit Luke in this if his legs were like bent at the knees, or if I cut him off. Like, so the torso and the head fit fine, but the legs were too long, because with these Hobby Masters and Corgis too, there's really not much foot room, because they want to get the cockpit in more detail. But yeah, they do interchange with reasonable expectations, meaning that, it's pretty consistent with 1/72 scale. And that's why I think the X-Wing is about that size. 12-ish meters, kind of in keeping with everything else. What do you think, though? And obviously the Hot Wheels is way too small. The Disney one is really perfect scale-wise, although I still feel like the figure inside's undersized, but that's probably just me. And even our Y-Wing is properly scaled to our X-Wing. Our wings are supposed to be larger, and it is, or at least longer. And this is about 7.5 inches long, and this is right at 6 inches, maybe 5 3/4. So you've got it well over an inch and a half more length, which is pretty appropriate. How long is a Y-Wing in universe? That's a damn good question. I've seen anywhere from 14 to 23 meters. Take your pick. And I know there are other variants like the the B, the A4 and all that, but it's bigger. And that's kind of the whole purpose of this line. It clearly shows this is a bigger aircraft or spacecraft. Well, so it works. I was telling my wife that for whatever reason I tend to buy more Star Wars stuff in the winter. I don't know. And I tend to buy more airplanes in the summer, and then Star Trek kind of falls in between spring and fall. I don't know why that is. I would have been interested to see what else could have come out in this line. But again, prices were high even before everything. I'm afraid they might have just priced themselves out. Either way, it was canceled quite early. Really only releasing 5-ish molds and a couple more repaints. So I didn't have a choice there. Still have my good old titaniums. I really like those, because they have a pretty full line. On the other hand, while they still keep making these Hot Wheels, unless they do like starships like the Mon Cal, the Venator, an Acclamator maybe, or a Separatist capital ship, any of them probably be the Providence. I don't think I'm going to buy anymore. The prices are just too much, and they're just kind of boring. I hate saying that, but really for less money, I've been very intrigued with these. And they're affordable enough even today that you can just kind of pick them up on a whim. In fact, this just came in the mail this afternoon. Yoda's little starfighter. Only a few companies have ever done models of this or toys. Hot Wheels did do a small scale one. And I think Lego has done one. Folding wings. It does have extending landing gear. Has opening canopy with a tiny... I really should not have trimmed my nails before doing this video. There we go. Tiny little Yoda in. And it just opens up just a bit for aesthetics, but you can pop it all the way open if you need to actually get him in and out. And he's not the easiest. He's got a lot of the vehicles have these little kind of clear clips to hold them in. He's even articulated, but only at the arms. And I got this in a bundle. They do these mystery boxes or blind boxes, so you kind of get what you get. And I actually got one that I kind of wanted. Where is it at? The little Separatist B1 droid on a STAP, single trooper aerial platform. He's perfectly removable, and he moves. In fact, you can fit any figure, well, maybe not Yoda, he might be a little small, on here. Yeah, I thought that was neat. And they do pretty standard ones, like speeder bikes, bark speeders, but they do some interesting variants too. They've got an E-Web heavy gun stormtrooper that I'd like to pick up. A neat little kit. Even if the prequels weren't the best films ever, the world building, to my mind, was really good in them. Great playground for the imagination, even for an adult. Roger. But yeah, I was actually happy. It is the luck of the draw. Luckily, if you get a lot of the common ones, they're pretty generic troopers, like, say, a scout trooper on a Z or 70Z speeder bike. So, you're never going to have too many of those, I suppose. Well, this was an off-the-cuff, unplanned video. I think we'll talk about the Battle of Yavin next time. But I did want to show this set. I don't think there's anything truly new in it. You can pick these up individually. But the X-Wing, the two TIEs, and TIE and Invaders, even if you just have one TIE, it's the same price. You basically get a free TIE fighter. I think this set is regularly $50, but you can get it with discounts and coupons for as low as $40. It's not bad for 4 ships, 5 little figurines. It should have probably come with a Y-Wing too, but to be fair, when this was released a year and a half ago, the Y-Wing didn't exist. The Y-Wing is $19.99. But it's new. I'm sure it'll come down in price a bit. That seems to be the thing. And if it doesn't, I'd rather pay $20 for it than $25 for one of the Hot Wheels Select. And I feel really bad about saying that, but they're doing more. Even if this line discontinues tomorrow, we have enough. We have all the main TIEs. We have all the main Rebel fighters except the B-Wing, but that's supposed to be coming sometime in 2024. We've got a Snowspeeder. We've got a heck of an AT-AT we'll talk about. We've got the Razor Crest, Slave One, which are larger. We just got an Imperial Shuttle. Yeah, I feel like we've kind of hit all the things, but we also get some just cool, kind of more obscure ships like Yoda's there. Plus all the little figures and different things. Different types of lot gunships. So I feel like they've done more in a year and a half than Hot Wheels has done in 3 years. And yeah, they've certainly done more than Disney did with their line. So to me, the negatives of being plastic and still more toy than model are outweighed by, frankly, just the fun factor, the nostalgia factor. And I really, really did enjoy Action Fleet. But in most ways, this ups the ante. Again, the X-Wing being a little smaller I thought might bother me, but it doesn't. And I thought not having a flight stand would bother me because I like to display my airplanes in flight, not landed. But, well, I still would like a stand, and I might make one, or several, because I've done it before. The gear are actually quite well done. At least they lock into position securely, unlike the titaniums and some others. So I don't think these are going to collapse, at least for most people, on your shelf. So that's neat. The Y-Wing has landing gear too. In fact, it's very tight. Unfortunately, our ties don't. They're just meant to kind of rest on their wings. Although the tie interceptor does come with a little stand. And that's just because it has weird shaped wings. But it would be nice to see that moving forward. Just a little piece of plastic. Just a little base. Not even a stand. Just like a base would be fine. Oh well. And more Clone Wars stuff. I think we'd like to see more Separatist stuff too. We got the Vulture. We've got the assault tank. An MTT would be cool. It would definitely have to be a larger scale, but that's okay. And trying to think what else we could do. A Hyena bomber, thinking about it, would be cool. Unfortunately, once you go past those, you're getting too large. In fact, I don't think, unless the Falcon was such a hero ship, they would have even attempted it. Because again, it needed to be almost the better part of 2 foot long to be in scale. So realistically, things like the Razor Crest or the Lot gunship or the AT-AT are about as big as you can do. So 50, 60 feet conversion. So we'll see. Of course, they could do a ginormous playset, but and they haven't done sets yet. They've just done like ships and figures and figure sets. And I do like that they're not focusing on the sequel trilogy much at all. We've had a few ships from Mando, and I'm sure we'll get some from the newer series, and that's alright. I think a lot of people would like to see the Ghost from Rebels. That'd be cool. I'm down with that. I like the shape of it. But, yeah, I really had been being good, and while watching videos when they came out on these, not picking them up. Part of it is I'm never seeing them in stores, so not tempted. Plus, around here, our Walmarts and Targets don't usually carry many of these. But once I got a couple in hand, it just kind of spurted on. Plus, I had some time and some Christmas money. Sorry about that. And I needed something new to collect, since didn't really have anything else going on. Eagle Moss is gone. Yeah, Master Replicas is here, but they're kind of slow releasing things. And Hobby Mastering is slow too and getting more and more expensive. And Corgi, I don't know what the hell Corgi's doing. No idea. It's always fun to have something to pursue, you know what I mean? So let's end with the story. We started with one. I told you my mother more or less accidentally picked me up the Action Fleet TIE Advanced, and I didn't know they even existed, but I went pretty whole hog into the Action Fleet line. I was the right age for it. And thinking back, I believe the very last toy I ever bought, at least at that point in my life, was an Action Fleet. Put have been 1998, senior in high school, and we were bored sitting around. We decided to drive to Toys R Us, me and a friend, and picked up a B-Wing that had just come out, and thought that was pretty cool. And I believe the B-Wing was my last Action Fleet. I'm trying to think if I got any for Christmas that year. I don't think so. By that point, the line was kind of petering out. Now, I know it got taken over by Hasbro, and they did do some prequels, But they kind of changed it up. They quit putting minifigures with them. They started doing more like fold-out play sets, less proportional vehicles, and that's what I like. Even beyond scale, I love scale, but a vehicle has to have the right proportions. If it doesn't, especially if you make it boxier so you can have play features inside, I'm not there for that. Yeah, so yeah, they kind of changed it up a bit. Plus, I was getting into college and stuff. Once you get into your 30s and 40s, then you can revisit that with no shame. But in your 20s, it's hard to do. Plus, I didn't have any money anyway. So it's kind of fitting that kind of picked this up after about 25 years. But I'll be interested to see where the line goes. For the most part, I'm pretty impressed. Quality seems good. Hope they continue to do unique vessels. And what I like to do with things like this is I don't just go immediately buy and pay retail. I actually find it fun to shop around and use discount codes and coupons and overstocks. It's just kind of part of the thrill for me. Although I think chasing those blind boxes might drive me mad, because I've kind of looked at what came out in the waves and made a list of the ones I'd like to get. Clones, stormtroopers namely. Maybe an Ewok on a glider. And getting them is literally the luck of the draw. I will say the very first one I opened up, though, was considered a quote-unquote chase, which was Cad Bane on his speeder, so that was kind of neat. But more or less, I like the troopers. But, I don't know. At least it's something neat that's happened and unexpected, and I've had some fun with it this week since Christmas. It was a good distraction at a point in my life when I desperately did need a distraction. So, thank you, Jazzware, I guess, and my mother, I guess, and my wife for letting me indulge in this stupid stuff, I guess. But we'll see where it goes. I'm sure I'll pick them up. Again, unless there's a massive price jump or quality drops off, I'll probably kind of see what's coming out. And that's what's nice, too, is they're not just dumping tons of these on the market at once. They're releasing them pretty regularly, but not so regularly that it's overwhelming. And I mentioned chases and all that. Most chases are simply repaints. Or, like with Luke's X-Wing, you get Jedi Luke instead of Pilot Luke. I don't care about that. There are a few, like the Outland TIE Fighter and General Grievous's ship, that are special chases that I'd like to get. But for the most part, they're just repaints, which is good for collectors. They can get them, but it's also good for a little bit more casual people who don't need every single variant. But, yeah. What do you think? What's your favorite wing? A-wing, B-wing, Y-wing, V-wing, U-wing? I think they might be doing a U-wing in this series. That could be a fun, bigger one. X-wing, of course. If so, which X-wing? We've had a few different variants. Maybe the Z95 Headhunter. That'd be kind of a neat one they could do here, too. Especially if they gave it to Mara Jade. Ooh, a Z95 with Mara Jade. That would be cool. I remember reading the Timothy Zahn books right when they came out. You have no idea how excited we were in 1991. Again, we hadn't had anything from Star Wars in 8 years. Nothing. Okay, we had the Ewok cartoon and the Droids cartoon, which is worse than nothing. Because I remember trying to watch that shit. Even at like 5, I'm like, what is this? And I like Ewoks. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, when Timothy Zahn's books came out, yeah, those are pretty great. Which slowly but surely kind of led to the resurgence of Star Wars that started to peak in 95, and then really got going in 1997 with the reissues, the special editions, which I went to all 3 films with a big group of friends, girls and boys alike, which was making it even better. And had fun there. And then I remember a friend and I got off work early and went and bought tickets for everyone in 1999 for us to all go see Phantom Menace that day. So that was fun. The film, but it's aged better than we probably thought it would. It is what it is. So yeah, there's a lot of points in my life. I remember Christmas breaks at home watching the Star Wars films. My friend I told you that also liked the action fleet. Whenever he stayed at my house a lot, whenever he'd go take a crap, he'd grab one of these, and I'd hear him in the bathroom going, it was funny at the time. He also reoriented my 12-inch G.I. Joes to be fucking each other on top of my entertainment center when I wasn't there, so people would come in and they would find interracial, sometimes interspecies erotica on my shelf that I didn't know was even there. Nah, good memories, good times. And that's why these are kind of fun for me. They're not action fleet, but they're sure bringing a lot of very good memories back. You have any toy lines or video games maybe, or books that are like that for you? Again, I really am quite impressed with these landing gear, just how secure they are too. In fact, the wings, everything in these isn't floppy or loose. I think that's what I was kind of worried about, them being toys. But they're not. Let's see how they go back. There we go. And the wings do fold up quite well. They're not floppy. No. Pleasantly surprised. Did you get anything from Christmas this year that was fun? How'd your New Year's go? Are you hungover today if you're actually watching this right after New Year's? Let me know. Also, if you know where I can get a Micro Galaxy AT, or AAT, excuse me, the Separatist tank that was part of Series 2, I'd like to get one of those. I'd also like to get that Outland TIE Fighter. I may or may not have already ordered Grievous to ship, though, and just paid a little bit of the eBay premium. Oh well, that's what I get for being a little bit late. But everything else I'm going to pick up at the $12 to $16 price point, except for, of course, the bigger vessels and walkers. That's another thing they could do. I want to see some Clone Wars walkers. Some of the really big ones might not be possible, but I'm thinking an OT, the all-terrain open transport, with all the one, that would be perfect for this line. They did do an AT-RT walker already, so maybe one of the AT-APs, the mobile artillery piece, that'd be small enough. Yeah, it's got that little hatch on top. Yeah, there's a lot they can do. Oh, and of course they did the ATST chicken walker early on too. What about a probe droid? What a probe droid? Maybe in a set with a Tauntaun. Ooh, that'd be neat. Like Han Solo on a Tauntaun, packed in those little boxes with the probe droid. See, there's just so much fun, and this scale's great. The figures are just big enough for detail, and the ships are still small enough you can get a lot of them on a shelf, and they still fit in a kid's hands, and they're not too tiny for an adult. I love miniatures. I think I get that from my mother. She used to do painting and like miniature things. She had like a miniature shadow box in the hallway with a little house, a little basin, like tiny, not even 1/72 scale. And yeah, I always thought that was neat as a kid. It's just fun to see what modern technology can do. Anyway, hope everyone's having a good start to 2024. Next time we'll talk about the Battle of Yavin, how 22 X-Wings and 8 Y-Wings went in, and 3 came out. 3 total. 2 X-Wings, both damaged, and one Y-Wing. But then again, only 1 Imperial TIE escaped, and it was damaged too, so yeah, gave as good as they got. This is Misha. Happy New Year, and catch you very soon next time.